Half price for the one-legged slave, the auctioneer laughed. But a human saw her true worth.
Gorath 7 was a heat-choked planet, barely rotating on its axis, its days long, suffocating and dry. Wind didn't howl here, it scraped. The sun didn't warm, it scorched. And in the scorched southern hemisphere, at the edge of a broken trade route once used by the Trollari convoys, sat the Dregs Market, an open-air slave ring built inside the broken body of a downed freighter. This was where the useless ended up. The market had no walls, just rusted scaffolds lashed to the ship's skeletal remains, torn fabric awnings barely shielding traders from the brutal daylight. Every surface was blistered metal or hardened earth, the ground cracked from years of foot traffic and engine waste. The air reeked of old lubricant, sweat, and smoke from nearby slag fires. A few dozen beings, humans, Threx, traders, 2 Zyreni merchants, even a hulking Furon enforcer, wandered between makeshift stalls, scanning crates, weapons, and bodies. Shackled captives stood on cracked display platforms, or were bolted directly to poles with magnetic cuffs. Most of them were silent. A few whimpered. One was dead and still hadn't been removed. Kalen Dorn, late 30s, stood near the edge of the crowd with his gloved hands resting at his sides. He wasn't looking to buy anything. He wasn't a slaver or a merchant, not anymore. Kalen had once been a combat field medic during the Orion clashes. He'd spent years trying to keep soldiers breathing long enough to be loaded onto evac ships that never came. Now he salvaged what was left of them, wrecked armor, crashed life pods, sometimes entire cryo chambers, and rebuilt. If it could spark, walk, or function again, he could restore it. His right leg carried an old injury. He walked with a minor drag step, unnoticed by most. His eyes scanned everything that never changed. He wasn't here to buy. He was here to trade a functioning modulator core for access to a wreck in Zone 12-1 that was under slaver protection. That's when he heard the voice over the cracked loudspeaker. Half price for the one-legged slave. Any takers for this worthless Valari? The voice came from Barrack Thrum, a sweaty, red-faced auctioneer leaning on a rusted console at the center of the ring. He was smiling. Most of the crowd was too. Not because they were interested, but because cruelty had become normal. Kalen turned and followed their line of sight. The woman chained to the pole had once been a Valari warrior. You could tell by the way she stood, slightly forward despite the pain, shoulders back, neck high. Her arms were restrained above her at an awkward angle. Her left leg remained strong, foot planted, toes curled against the heat of the metal floor. The right leg ended mid-thigh, wrapped in blood-stained gauze. No signs of infection, but clearly untreated. Her stomach was flat, firm, but bruised. Her ribs showed. Her bandeau wrap was ripped in several places. Her pale lavender skin was dusty and scraped. Hair fell in tangled silver-black sheets around her shoulders, with a single braided cord hanging behind her ear. Her eyes, a sharp, glowing indigo, weren't dulled by pain. She wasn't crying. She was watching. She was processing every face in the crowd, measuring, waiting. Kalen's gaze held on her longer than he intended. The Valari had been nearly wiped out a generation ago during the Helix cleansing. Survivors were scattered, some enslaved, some vanished into exile. Valari warriors were trained from adolescence, taught to climb, strike, fight in near silence. But the one chained in front of him was no longer fighting. She was enduring. Kalen glanced around. Nobody moved. The auctioneer laughed again. Used to be a soldier, maybe, but who wants a crippled Valari now, huh? A few of the men chuckled. Could still be useful, if you like 'em quiet. More laughter. Kalen looked again. She wasn't silent because she was broken. She was silent because she refused to give them anything. He stepped forward without planning to. I'll take her. The voice came out flat, low, and unhesitating. Even Kalen felt surprised. Beric blinked. "You what?" I said, "I'll take her." "You got payment or just sympathy?" Kalen pulled a cloth-wrapped cylinder from his side satchel and tossed it. It landed with a thud on the display crate. Beric peeled the wrap. His eyes widened. A salvaged modulator core, clean, still powered, real value. He made a short, greedy grunt and nodded toward his assistant. "Unbind her?" A low hiss escaped as the magnetic cuffs disengaged. The Valari's arm dropped like dead weight. She nearly collapsed, then locked her stance again. Her balance shifted unevenly. Her jaw tightened. Callan didn't touch her. He stepped forward, took off his outer jacket and held it out. She didn't move. Her chest rose and fell with small, short breaths. She was watching his face, not the coat, not his hands, just his eyes. He slowly crouched and set the jacket on the ground near her. Then he pulled out a canteen, uncapped it, and set it next to the coat. She stared at both for another second. Then her legs buckled, and she collapsed. The outpost was buried under collapsed starship plating on the eastern ridge, barely visible unless you knew the route. Kalen dragged her body the full distance, using a makeshift sled repulsor rig. It took him 3 hours in the sun. By the time they reached the shelter, her skin was blazing, pulse erratic. He cooled her with cryogel, cut away the bloodied gauze, cleaned the stump. 2 inches more and the leg would have been unsalvageable. He sterilized the wound, applied derm seal, and wrapped it in a new carbon fiber brace. He didn't speak. She didn't wake until that evening. She opened her eyes in a dim metal room, lying on a padded cot beneath a sheet. The smell of antiseptic lingered faintly in the air. A repurposed climate unit hummed near the far wall. One of her wrists had been rebandaged. Her leg was elevated on a support, and across the room, Kalen was working. Sleeves rolled, goggles on, hands assembling a joint casing. Her prosthetic was half finished. She said nothing, watched in silence. Her throat was dry, her fingers trembled slightly, though she hid it beneath the blanket. He finally looked up. "Water's on the shelf," he said. "Food's there if you want it. I'm not going to lock the door." Still, no answer. He didn't press, he just turned back to the workbench. She didn't ask questions over the next 2 days. She didn't speak. Kalen didn't try to force anything. She ate, slowly, watched him work. She examined the parts, scanned the blueprints he projected onto the wall, listened to the hum of welders and the quiet beeps from diagnostic scanners. He worked like a man who needed to focus, like someone who couldn't afford to think too long about anything else. She understood that kind of focus. It was survival. On the 3rd night, she stood, wobbled slightly, walked barefoot to the workbench, and rested her hand on the table. He looked up. Her other hand touched the polished edge of the nearly completed prosthetic leg. Matte chrome, slim, etched with Valari script along the calf plate. Symbols of movement, memory, pride. Her voice was hoarse. "Where did you take me?" It wasn't gratitude. It was a demand. Kalen didn't look away. "Because I've seen too many people left behind." She looked at him a long time, then nodded once, and said nothing more. It was just past the second sun's rise when Valari stepped out of the shelter and into the filtered morning heat of Gorath 7. Her balance was uneven but determined. She leaned slightly to one side, the carbon-braced stump of her leg wrapped tightly beneath the threadbare combat skirt Kalen had given her. Her arms remained tense, coiled with silent energy, but her face showed no pain. Just calculation. She was studying the terrain, the sky, the access points to the ridge. She wasn't planning escape. She was confirming her location. Inside, Kalen knelt beside a compact work table, fine-tuning the actuators of the prosthetic leg. His tools were lined with obsessive precision. Every movement was practiced, clean and silent, just like a combat medic's had to be. He checked the charge level of the power cell, adjusted the tension of the knee joint, then looked toward the open door. She hadn't run. She hadn't asked to leave. That was something. When she came back in, he didn't speak. He turned the prototype toward her and gestured toward the chair beside the diagnostic rig. She sat. Her fingers brushed over the alloy, smooth, cool, etched with Velari glyphs for stability and motion. The marks weren't ornamental. They were cultural. A Velari warrior never wore a weapon or enhancement without script to give it meaning. Her voice came quiet. "You studied our design language?" He nodded once. "My mentor in the field, the Savaclaus translator, taught me the basics during downtime." "You're human." "I was stationed in Zone Delta during the Helix campaign. I saw enough to learn." She looked away. A brief flicker of tension crossed her shoulders. "Then you know what they did to us?" Kalen's hand stopped moving. "Yes." That was all he said. She nodded once. She didn't thank him. She didn't have to. The next few hours passed in near silence, interrupted only by the hiss of the hydraulic clamps and the rhythmic hum of the calibrator as he adjusted the prosthetic leg to fit her anatomy. When he finally lifted the limb and aligned it with her stump, she didn't flinch. She stared forward, breathing slow, as he connected the interface port to her residual nerve pathways. The feedback was instant, muscle tension, joint response, full contact. He tested the flex, her brow furrowed as she moved the foot. "I can feel the ground." "There's a pressure sensor in the base," he explained. "It's not native nervous response, but it mimics your stride weight. Took it from a second-gen Zyrene lifter frame." Valeri looked down at the leg. Not with amazement, just quiet acceptance. Then she stood. The balance was off for only a second. Then it wasn't. Her gait stabilized, her arms relaxed. She took 3 paces forward, 3 paces back, pivoted, looked down at the etchings again. "I thought I'd never walk properly again." "You didn't walk out of that market," he said flatly. "You stood. That told me everything." She paused at the threshold of the room. "You're not a traitor," she said. "Not anymore." "Then why are you here?" Kalen leaned back in the chair and rubbed the side of his neck. There was a long silence before he answered. "Salvage contract. I'm clearing an old med cruiser buried half a click east. I needed access past the slaver ring to get permission to work the site. That was the deal. Trade them a working core, they let me work their territory. Slavers usually don't honor deals. I don't usually honor theirs either." Valeri considered that. Then, "So you didn't go there to buy anyone?" "Then why me?" He looked at her, steady. "You looked like someone who used to fight, and someone who still could if she wanted to." Her jaw flexed slightly. Not rejection. Something closer to discomfort, maybe something deeper. "You don't know what I did. You were chained to a pole in the middle of a junk market being mocked like you were trash. Whatever came before that doesn't matter. You're here now, walking again." Another silence. Then she sat beside the workbench and reached for a half-broken gauntlet on the shelf. "I want to fix something," she said. "Let me earn my stay." "You don't owe me anything." "I know. That's why I'm offering." Kalen didn't argue. He slid the gauntlet toward her and turned on the workspace light. Later that night, they sat near the portable heater while a solar storm howled faintly against the outer panels. The lights dimmed, then stabilized. Kalen was finishing repairs on a perimeter sensor. Valeri sat with her leg elevated, wrapping new leather strapping around the prosthetic socket to reduce impact noise during movement. She hadn't asked about his limp, not directly. But when she finished, she finally said, "You walk uneven. Scar tissue?" "The old blast wound," Kalen said. "We were airlifting wounded off a ridge. I didn't make it inside the shuttle in time." You lose anyone? And you help them. She looked at him then for a longer moment than usual. Then why keep helping people? Because someone still should. Valery didn't respond to that. But the next morning she woke before he did. And the workbench had already been organized, tools sorted, parts grouped by function, and a repaired motion sensor left out, fully wired and sealed. She was starting to stay, not as a guest, but as someone rebuilding, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to ask permission. The outpost wasn't meant for two. It barely supported one. But by the fourth day, Kalen found himself moving his bedding mat to make more space near the heater, rewiring the ration cooker for dual output, and adjusting the shower's drainage to accommodate someone who now used a prosthetic leg. Valery didn't ask for any of it. She simply adapted, silently. She now worked beside him most mornings, repairing broken sensor nodes, cleaning scavenged parts, and rewiring damaged drone cores. Her hands were steady, her grip strong. The way she handled tools told Kalen she'd had mechanical training. Probably field-level tech experience, rare among Valery frontline warriors. She didn't talk about her past, but he started filling in the gaps from the way she moved and what she did instinctively. That day, the wind outside was carrying static, which meant another dust surge from the southern ridges. Kalen had taken apart a broken hover sled engine to check for coolant corrosion. Valery sat across from him, wrapping fiber shielding for a cable relay when she asked, without looking up, but here, Kalen didn't immediately respond. He clarified. Garath 7, you have no ties here. You're not with the syndicates. So why stay? He wiped grease from his fingers. There's a wreck east of here, buried under slag, pre-concept medical freighter. If it still has power, the onboard cryobank might have DNA archives, treatment records, maybe even fusion compound stock. That stuff could change a dozen lives on a cleaner world. And why not sell the location? Because they'd strip it bare in 2 days and forget what it was. Valery paused her work. And you're going to restore it? Piece by piece, he said. If I can. She glanced at him, almost skeptically. That's not survival thinking. No, Kalen replied, but it's living. It's living. She looked back down and continued wrapping the relay. They didn't speak again for the next hour. But the silence had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. That evening, just after the static winds calmed, Kalen ran a diagnostic on the perimeter grid and noticed something strange. A secondary motion sensor on the western ridge had been tripped. Not a bird, not a rodent. The signature was too precise, too slow, like someone scouting. He looked over at Valery, who was sharpening the edge of a blade she'd reassembled from old scrap. How long has it been since they tried to track you? Her fingers froze. I don't know. You escaped them? I was sold, then resold, then discarded. Someone's looking. We had a ping on the west ridge. She stood immediately, set the blade down. How far? 600 meters, descending slow. Could be nothing, but we need to prep. She nodded. They moved together quickly, disengaging the visible solar units, stashing crates under camo netting, powering down the main inverter to minimize thermal output. Valery grabbed the small holdout pistol Kalen kept under the ration shelf. She checked the mag with a practiced click. No hesitation. You've done this before, he noted. I had to, she said flatly. You don't survive 7 ownership chains by being soft. Kalen didn't ask for more. That night, they both slept in half shifts, trading off watch in 2-hour intervals. Kalen took the first. When he tapped her awake near midnight, she didn't flinch. Just rose quietly, blanket falling aside, and stepped into position near the door, her prosthetic now fully integrated with a reinforced boot frame. The tracker didn't come that night, but they both knew it wouldn't be the last ping. The next morning, as they packed emergency supplies and rigged a fallback route through the East Canyons, Vailari finally spoke again, this time about something personal. "I wasn't captured in combat," she said. "I surrendered, voluntarily." Kalen didn't react. He let her keep talking. "My unit was ambushed. Most died in the first strike. I tried to hold them back. I couldn't. When the second wave came, I gave up my weapon to buy time for one of our scouts to escape." "Did they?" She nodded slowly. "She did. Young, barely passed the trials. I don't even remember her name." Galen nodded once. "That doesn't sound like surrender. That sounds like leadership. Hillary leaders don't survive. We die standing." "You're standing now?" She gave him a long look. For a moment, something passed between them. Something more than survival, a quiet, wordless understanding. Later that day, while working on the outer solar mount, Kalen caught her watching him as he climbed the rigging. When he dropped to the ground again, she approached and handed him a stabilizing brace he'd forgotten. "You shouldn't put weight on your right leg for extended climbs," she said calmly. He gave her a faint smile. "I know. Bad habit. Bad habits get you killed. You just learn to work around them." She folded her arms. "Like you did with me?" "No, I didn't work around you. I built something new." She didn't reply, but her eyes didn't look away. That night she came into the workshop after lights out, her skin still damp from the shower unit, hair combed out for the first time. She stood near the workbench, one hand resting on the prosthetics maintenance clamp. "I didn't think anyone would see me as anything but defective." "I never did," Kalen said without looking up. She took one slow step closer. "Then why haven't you tried to own me or use me like the others?" Kalen stood, face her directly. "Because you're not something I own. You're someone I'm walking beside." A long pause, her jaw clenched. Then she said something he hadn't expected. "I think I was waiting to feel like a person again." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She stepped closer and with slow caution reached for his hand. This wasn't rescue anymore. This was the start of something real. The warning came just after dusk. A short-range drone, no bigger than a loaf of bread, buzzed past the ridge perimeter at low altitude. It didn't fire. It didn't transmit. It scanned and retreated. Silent, clean, professional. Kalen spotted it through the scope of his recon lens while adjusting a heat vent on the roof. Vailari was inside preparing rations. She heard the subtle shift in the wind and came out before he even called. "They made us, found us," she said. He didn't ask how she knew. He just nodded and walked back inside. Within minutes, the outpost shifted from a safe house to an evacuation zone. Kalen moved fast, stripping only the essentials: thermal maps, repair tools, backup data cores, and the collapsible prosthetic repair kit. Vailari grabbed a field pack, rolled 2 rations into cloth, and checked the power cells on their only rifle. She didn't panic. She moved like someone who had run before, who knew how to leave a life behind, even if it was just beginning to feel like one. She paused once, glancing at the solar charger built into the ceiling beam. "You spent days installing that?" "Wasn't planning on visitors," he replied. Within 20 minutes, the entire outpost was sterilized. They left through a drainage tunnel beneath the outer paneling and followed a ridge trail heading east toward the slag canyons and the buried medcruiser that Kalen had come to Gorath 7 for in the first place. They walked in silence under the stars. The sky was black and scorched above them. Clusters of satellites barely visible as they drifted overhead like dead things. Vailari's prosthetic leg clicked softly with each step. It wasn't loud, but it reminded both of them of what was at stake. They made camp inside a derelict cargo container sunk halfway into the canyon floor, It was partially shielded from thermal scans and had only one access point, an old maintenance hatch rusted half shut. They sealed it from the inside and left only a small gap for airflow. Inside, the space was narrow, dim. Dust hung in the air. They didn't light a lamp. Vaylari sat cross-legged on the floor, back against the wall, her pack beside her. Her chest rose and fell slowly, but her jaw remained tight. She wasn't breathing like someone who was calm. Kalen dropped to sit across from her. "You were in that camp a long time," he said, "weren't you?" She nodded. "Long enough to forget how to sleep without thinking I might not wake up." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "I know that feeling." She looked at him. Really looked. "Did you lose someone close?" He didn't blink. "Her name was Mira, combat nurse. We rotated on the same medships. During the evac on Halora 3, she stayed behind to keep the wounded stabilized. I was ordered to leave. By the time I came back, there was nothing left." Vaylari didn't ask questions. She didn't offer sympathy. "But she did say you stopped talking about her." Kalen nodded. "No one ever asked after the first year." They sat together in the dark a long while. Then Valeri shifted closer, just slightly. "You said you came here to recover a medical cruiser," she said. "Why haven't we gone yet?" "I didn't think I'd have to run so soon. Needed time. I thought we were safe." Her fingers traced the edge of the rifle stock beside her. "Then we go now." The next morning they moved early. The route to the med-cruiser was buried under collapsed slag and twisted metal, but Kalen had mapped it in pieces during his first week on the planet. They used an old access hatch buried behind a broken crawler tank, entering through a side vent and crawling 50 meters through an oxygen-choked shaft. Inside the ship, the air was cold, still pressurized in some compartments. Emergency lights flickered on contact with their suits. Dust rose with each footstep, untouched for years. The ship was massive, a floating field hospital meant to serve war zones. Long corridors stretched into blackness. Cryo chambers lined both sides, their hibernation cells covered in grime, screens long dead. Vaylari stopped in front of one and wiped the glass with her hand. Inside, bones, thin, human, still wrapped in a faded uniform. She swallowed hard and said nothing. They pushed deeper into the ship until they reached the primary databank. Kalen powered it with a portable cell. The screen flickered alive. Faint green text scrolled across it. Accessing servicer logs. He tapped quickly, hands moving with precision. Vaylari stood behind him, one hand on the hilt of her blade. "We need whatever medical records still exist," he muttered. "Treatment data, anti-infection synth cultures, neural bridge designs. If I can copy it." A sound echoed from the vent shaft. Clank. Then another. Vaylari tensed instantly, stepping back, eyes narrowing. "The Matilne." Kalen pulled the drive core and stuffed it into his pack. They ran. The next 10 minutes blurred into instinct. Metal halls, rusted turns, vault doors forced open, sliding down half-collapsed tunnels until they burst into daylight on the far side of the wreck. A sniper round hit the gravel near Vaylari's foot. She shoved Kalen to the side, ducking behind the rusted wing of an old VTOL thruster, and returned fire once, just enough to break the aim. Her prosthetic leg absorbed the crouch cleanly. No stumble, no hesitation. "We go east," Kalen said. "There's a ravine. If we get across, we lose line of sight." They ran again, breath short, limbs aching. Heat blazed from above, dirt scattered from fresh impacts behind them. At the edge of the ravine, Vaylari didn't wait. She grabbed a fallen steel beam and swung it down across the gap, using it like a bridge. Kalen followed close. They made it halfway when a bullet tore past them and struck the metal with a shriek of spark. She didn't stop. Not until they were over, not until they were gone. That night, in the shelter of a dry cavern far beyond the ridge, Kalen sealed the data core inside a thermal pouch and collapsed back onto the rock floor. His chest heaved. Vaylari sat beside him, arms bruised, skin scratched, one shoulder burned from a glancing shot. Her breathing was slow and steady, not calm, controlled. He looked at her. "You okay?" She gave a quiet nod. Then she said something he didn't expect. "I never would have made that run alone, not anymore." "You did." She met his eyes. "Because you were beside me." He didn't answer right away. But she didn't look away either. They didn't stop moving for 2 days. The trails east of the ravine were difficult, choked with brittle stone formations, collapsed mining corridors, and winds that could slice through exposed skin. But Kalen and Vaylari pushed through it without complaint. Not because they were strong, but because they had no other option. By the end of the second day, they found shelter in an abandoned coolant processing station buried into the canyon wall. It was small, just a few rusted rooms with a collapsed roof and shattered equipment, but it had solar film on the walls and a functioning filtration unit. More importantly, it was quiet. No drones, no pings. Vaylari stood in the center of the main chamber, her arms crossed. The cut across her left shoulder was sealed but sore. Her eyes scanned every wall, every corner. She was still in defense mode. "We'll stay for now," Kalen said. "But if they were smart enough to track the old outpost, they'll triangulate this zone eventually." "How long?" 3 days. Maybe 4, if we stay cold. Vaylari gave a curt nod and moved to secure the door manually with a braced steel beam. When she returned, she didn't sit. She walked slowly, checking gear, unpacking the salvaged components from her bag, running diagnostics on the rifle. Kalen noticed her favoring her left side. He sat against the wall, working on a backup comm relay using scavenged boards. "You're hurting more than you're showing." She didn't look up. "Pain means it's still mine?" He didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a small med patch. "Put that on the muscle. It'll help the tissue reset overnight." She hesitated, then peeled off her shoulder wrap and applied the patch with slow fingers. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the filter. As she rewrapped the fabric around herself, her eyes caught his. "You don't ask me questions," she said. "Would you answer?" "No." "Then why point it out?" She looked down, her voice dropped. "Because part of me wants to." That caught him off guard. He set the relay down. "You said something back in the canyon about not being able to do that run alone." "I meant it." She stepped forward slowly, prosthetic clicking faintly on the steel floor. Her posture was straight, but her voice was different, lower, tighter. "When they took my legs," she said, "they didn't just cut away flesh. They took my balance, my speed, my silence. Everything Vaylari are trained to use. I spent months strapped to walls, starved, mocked. When they chained me to that pole in the market, I told myself I'd never let another person near me again. Never again." She swallowed. "And you walked up. No chains, no orders, just water." Kalen didn't speak. She sat beside him. Carefully, quietly, her hand brushed the top of her prosthetic joint. Her breathing was shallow, controlled. "I thought you were just another scavenger playing the savior game. I thought you'd patch me up and wait for me to beg." "I don't want begging," he said. "I know," she whispered. "And that's the problem." He turned slightly toward her. "What do you want now?" Vaylari exhaled. Her eyes were sharp, but not cold. "I don't know, but for the first time since they broke me, I want something." The air between them held still. She reached toward his face, hesitant at first, then firmer, touching the scar just under his eye. Her thumb paused there, and her voice came low, careful. "This scar, how'd you get it?" "Shrapnel," he said. Emergency evac, I was shielding a kid who didn't make it. She nodded slowly. Then she leaned in, barely cautiously, and rested her forehead against his. Not a kiss. Not yet. But trust. Kalen didn't move away. He let it happen. They stayed like that a while, breathing, grounded, two broken survivors in the silence of rust and shadows, sharing warmth without need for anything more than presence. Later that night, Kalen worked in the adjoining room while Vailari slept on a makeshift bedding mat. Her face for the first time was soft. Not alert, not defensive. He glanced at her and saw the movement in her chest. Slow, steady. Her prosthetic was unclasped at the thigh and lay beside her, her remaining leg bent gently at the knee. He realized something. She hadn't spoken in her sleep. No thrashing, no stifled gasps, no whispered names or shouted threats. She was just resting, for the first time she truly had, he guessed, in years. He turned back to his work and finished assembling the secure relay. It would mask their coordinates, allow outbound signals, and give them a slight upper hand when they moved again. But for now, they were still together. And breathing. The calm didn't last. On the second morning, the sensor tripwire Kalen had placed at the canyon mouth blinked red. A slow-moving heat signature, barely detectable but deliberate. Someone was scanning the area without triggering their decoys. Smart, experienced, possibly syndicate level. Colin killed the readout and moved to wake Vailari. She was already pulling her harness into place, prosthetic locked and active. "How close?" she asked as she tightened the strap across her ribs. "Less than a click. We need to leave." Vailari nodded once and grabbed the rifle from its magnetic lock near the door. She checked the mag, then looked at him. "They're not going to stop this time, are they?" "No. If it's syndicate, they'll sweep until we're dead. Or back in chains." Vailari's jaw locked, her voice steady. "Then we kill them first." They left the shelter by climbing through the roof panel and dropping silently into the canyon shadows. Kalen carried the loaded data core in a shock-proof pack. Vailari led. Her movements sharp and precise now, almost like they had been before she lost the leg. She knew this terrain better than he did. She moved like it was war again. 15 minutes later, they reached the upper ridge above the valley floor and set up a position beneath a collapsed signal dish. Kalen assembled his scoped rifle. Vailari kept her eyes on the dust trail approaching from the west. 3 figures appeared, 2 in tactical armor, 1 in a hooded cloak. The lead had a scanning rod, sweeping left and right with slow confidence. Mercs. Not syndicate regulars, independent bounty team, hired specifically. That was worse. Vailari exhaled quietly. "I recognize the tall one. He was there when they sold me the second time. Broken arm, I gave it to him." "You think they'll try to capture?" She shook her head. "They were told to kill me if I resisted." Kalen steadied the rifle. She looked at him. "If I go down..." "You're not going down. If I do, you leave, take the core, get it off-world." "I'm not leaving without you." Their eyes met. Then she turned and moved low, vanishing into the rock like a shadow. The fight broke out fast. Vailari struck first, using the terrain to circle behind the lead scout and take him out with a swift blade through the neck. Silent. Efficient. The other 2 reacted instantly, one opening fire blindly, the other ducking behind a broken engine pod and firing suppression rounds uphill. Kalen dropped to prone, sighted the shooter and squeezed the trigger. One clean shot to the shoulder spun the merc out of cover. Vailari closed the gap. She moved with terrifying precision, prosthetic locking mid-lunge, stabilizing her stance as she drove the blunt side of her weapon into the second man's neck, then pivoted and swept his leg from under him. He went down hard. The last one tried to run. She didn't let him. Kalen caught up 30 seconds later. The 3 bodies lay sprawled in the dust, blood soaking into sand. Vailari stood over the last one, still breathing but barely. Her hands were slick with sweat and blood. She was shaking, not from weakness, from control, resisting the urge to go further. "You okay?" Kalen asked. She didn't answer right away. She was staring at her hand, the one that had just ended a life. When she looked up, her voice was low. "That felt like me again. You are you." "No, not who I was before. Something new." She wiped her palm on her belt. Then she turned to Kalen. "We can't keep running. We hit first next time." He nodded. "We'll need gear, transport, and a clean route off-world." Vailari pulled a datapad from one of the bodies and scanned it. Her expression hardened. "They've marked you as a collaborator," she said. "Syndicate bounty is live now, or both of us." "How much?" 15,000. "Dead or alive?" Kalen gave a faint smirk. Should have asked for more. She didn't laugh, but she looked at him with something different in her eyes now. Not fear, not grief, conviction. "We take the core to the Derrick outpost on the northern range," she said. "They have launch access. If they want to kill us, they'll have to do it there. And if they try, we kill every last one of them." Later, when they found shelter in a rusted service dome high above the canyon ridge, Kalen patched her shoulder. The burn from the kinetic shot earlier had opened again. She sat still while he cleaned the wound. "You've never asked about what I want after this," she said suddenly. He looked at her. "I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to." She turned her face toward his. "I don't know if I want freedom, Kalen. Not the way people talk about it. I don't even know what it means anymore." He paused. "What do you want, then?" She was quiet a moment. Then, "Someone who doesn't look at me and see a broken thing. Someone who sees me as mine, just mine." "You already are." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she kissed him. It wasn't soft. It wasn't desperate. It was a decision. They reached Derrick Outpost just before dusk on the 5th day. It was carved into the northern ridge like an old scar, half abandoned, partially buried under collapsed cargo struts and faded banners of dead factions. But it still operated. Barely. A black market refueling node for outbound haulers, overlooked by most syndicate patrols. Its landing pad was functional. The atmosphere scrubbers groaned, and for now the skies were quiet. Vailari stepped onto the cracked permacrete first, eyes scanning the ridgelines. Her gait was fluid now, balanced, steady. The prosthetic leg moved like a natural extension of her body. Her scavenger harness clung tight across her chest. Bracers laced up her forearms. The bruises had faded. The limp was gone. Kalen followed behind, rifles slung across his back, carrying the sealed data core in a reinforced shell. His jaw was tense, but his hands were steady. He hadn't slept properly in days, but it didn't matter, not now. They walked side by side through the checkpoint gate, past a bored droid scanner and 2 guards who didn't ask questions. Everyone here was armed. No one wanted trouble. In the central hangar bay, a single outbound freighter sat warming its engines. Their ride. Kalen handed the crate to the quartermaster at the fueling station. The man, oily and tired, scanned the seal and blinked. "This is medical code, pre-fall registry. Haven't seen this tag since..." "We're uploading it to the Helix refugee network," Kalen said. "Get it on the relay. Lock the transmission." The man hesitated. "You want a cut?" "No, just send it." Vailari stood behind him, watching the upper gantries, always alert, always listening. The quartermaster nodded slowly. "Copy that. Uploading now." As the terminal flickered to life, Kalen turned to her. "Once it's out there, we're done. They'll find the data. They'll distribute the cures. It'll matter. Larry looked at him, steady. And then what? He didn't answer right away, because in truth he hadn't thought that far. He'd spent so long surviving, he wasn't used to after. Before he could respond, the perimeter alarm screamed. One high, piercing tone. Valerie was already moving. She reached the upper ledge in seconds and dropped behind a barricade, rifle raised. Kalen took cover behind a freight hauler. Below, a black vehicle skimmed into view, light-armored, syndicate make, 6 hostiles in full gear, 2 snipers, 4 close range. They moved with confidence. But they hadn't expected resistance. The first shot came from Valerie, clean, precise, dropping the lead scout mid-step. The second went wide but flushed the snipers off their perch. Kalen flanked low and used a broken rail ramp to flank behind the southern column. He sighted one of the gunners and pulled the trigger. The man didn't get up. The firefight escalated fast. Syndicate troops pushed toward the hangar, but Valerie and Kalen moved like they were built for this. She took high ground, shifting between angles like wind through debris. Her shots were surgical, controlled, each movement purposeful. Kalen moved like a medic who'd spent years under fire. Slow, calm, deliberate. He didn't waste bullets. He covered her flanks, dropped hostiles on approach, repositioned without panic. In less than 4 minutes, it was over. 6 bodies on the ground, smoke rising, no survivors. Inside the outpost, the workers hadn't moved. No one helped, but no one interfered either. As the wind picked up again, Valerie dropped to a crouch, breathing hard, knuckles pale. Kalen reached her side. "Your head." She shook her head. "Not mine." He looked at her, hands settling on her shoulders. "You all right?" She didn't answer for a second. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, steady. "I didn't run. I didn't freeze. You didn't even miss." She stood slowly, looked around. "They're going to keep coming," she said. "Not if we disappear." He gestured toward the ship. "I spoke to the pilot before you scouted. He'll take us to the outer belt. New IDs, fresh registry. We disappear." Valerie looked at him. "And after?" Kalen hesitated. "Then we rebuild somewhere they don't know your name or mine." She stared at him for a long time. Then she said something soft, measured. "You're not a savior, Kalen. You didn't fix me." "I didn't want to." She stepped closer. "You reminded me I'm not just salvage. You never were." And then she kissed him again. This time slower. No tension, no defense, just warmth. And choice. Later, aboard the freighter, as they passed the upper edge of Gorath 7's atmosphere, she sat beside him in the hold, her head on his shoulder. Stars slid past the viewport. He rested his hand on hers. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want a place with quiet mornings. And water. Deal. And someone who won't ask me to be soft just to be wanted. You already have that." She smiled faintly. The stars kept moving. For the first time in a long time, there was nothing chasing them. No collars, no chains, no markets, no poles. Just freedom. Together.